Good morning, it's Somewhere, and welcome to the brand new Concellation 2021 Green Room. It's easy to feel like we haven't quite escaped 2020, so we brought in experts Alistair Stewart and Marguerite Kenner.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how you guys doing?
It's a hard question to answer, isn't it? It's we personally are well. The universe is on fire. Thank you for asking.
Your corner of the apocalypse is doing all right.
We're well
It's very
provisioned.
tidy right now. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Nice tidy apocalypse. It's a very neat pile of fire.
We'll continue.
So I appreciate your taking a break from all the recordings you guys do to come and record with us.
Our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the stuff you've been doing right now.
Okay. Our primary, basically, the thing which we do is we co-own a company called Escape Artists. And Escape Artists produces 4 weekly genre fiction podcasts. They all have the same format. There's a host who will introduce the story and then talk about the story a little bit at the end, and then out. They're all loosely the same length.
The story is in the middle. Just in
Yes.
case we missed that part.
That would be a good place to put the story.
By and large,
Well,
we
you
found,
think, but
you know,
we're podcasters. That's usually where people want to put the ads, which is why
Yeah.
we don't run them.
the stories all tend to be about the same length too. They average about 6,000 to 8,000 words, because the company was founded 15 years ago by Sarah Ely, and Sarah basically did this because she was bored on her commutes. Remember those? Remember when we had them, and would record these science fiction stories for herself to listen to. And around the same time this happened, a couple of weeks in, she read this article about this new exciting technology called podcasting. So decided to give it a try.
And then podcasting was invented again in 2014 by Serial, if you ask any journalist.
And then 2016 by Mark Maron.
Yeah, exactly. So our industry continues to be reinvented by people who don't do their history.
Now, a couple of years before podcasting was invented, we actually bought the company from Sarah in 2014. And at that point, it was only 3 shows. It was Escape Pod, which does science fiction and has gone on to pick up 2 Hugo nominations. Pseudopod, which does horror, which is the show I host, and Podcastle, which does fantasy. And in the intervening years, we were able to bring aboard Cast of Wonders, which does YA fiction, which Marguerite edited and hosted at the time. And that kind of completed our ragtag fugitive fleet. and we have proceeded merrily onwards ever since.
Exactly. It's the 15th year anniversary of the company this year.
15 years is a lot in an industry that's been around for 15 years, give or take. So what got you to buy a company as opposed to starting one from scratch? What's the property that makes a company in podcasting?
That's a really good question.
That is a fantastic question.
The short version is that Alistair was the longest serving staff member at the time. And when Sarah wanted to step away, he was the safe pair of hands that Sarah wanted to see the company kind of transferred to. We approached it like a startup. So we went into it with a 0 to 5 year plan, which mostly involved opening cupboards, finding fires, reclosing cupboards and such. Your question is a really good one. To speak to the heart of it, we struggle with it because when you're a company that's in an industry that is radically remaking itself year after year after year, your technology gets outdated really quickly. For example, if we were to start a new show now, we would never, ever do it on a weekly publication model. It has some limitations to it, which are really difficult. Whereas that was the 5-6 years ago when we took the company over, that was the way you did things. That's how you built an audience, is lots and lots of repetition. Now we know that having an audience is about good communication.
Yeah.
And if you build in things like seasons and breaks, like television does, that's fine. Your audience knows when you're going to be back.
To be explicit, we publish weekly, 52 weeks a year.
Yeah.
Every week, without fail.
The great Will Ferrell quote that I'm thinking of is when he said, "The show starts because it's 11:30, not because we're ready, but because it's 11:30." So yeah, I understand the weekly struggle.
Yeah, exactly that. But that's just also a sign of how I think the industry has changed for the good, in that it recognizes the drain of previous expectation on its creative teams, and the audience is therefore educated itself that, no, it's okay that I'm going to have 12 episodes and then I know there's going to be a 4-month break and then I'll come back. it's a little more sustainable for an audience as well, because it means you're not doing what I'm doing, which is trying to keep track of 65 podcasts on my phone screams at me every time I try to update the catcher.
So podcasting is obviously, as you're saying, changed quite a bit.
Mhm.
How have you seen that reflected in the type of material that you're choosing or the format? Has any of it changed, or have you found that what you have was kind of built to last even with the changes?
You talk about this and then I'll
yeah,
point.
we have a metaphor that we really like about which actually fits what Escape Artists does a lot of the time. We are the original saloon in the Gold Rush town. We are the place that everyone used to come to, and a lot of people still do. But when we were first built, there was us and Ian McShane face down in a pool of dirt water off to one side, and Timothy Oliphant growling nearby, and that was basically podcasting. Now we're in the middle of a really respectable, bustling city where there are all these kind of exciting new places and new shops and new saloons doing new stuff. And we look modern, we've done the place up, but it's still the old saloon.
Yeah.
Which means that some people instinctively walk past us because we've always been there. And that's really the one thing that we still struggle with.
It's hard to not it's hard not to get invested in, but I was here before when there is new hotness and new interest. But at the same time, you don't want to be old man yells at clouds. So you just kind of have to move on with yourself.
And that constant payoff between consistency and evolution is really kind of the core of the company these days.
Yeah.
Because we're looking at a couple of new formats quite soon. But at the same time, we're very aware that listeners have made it very clear that they like us showing up 4 times a week.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's it,
The other kind of unique struggle I think we face as podcasting these days it faces a couple of challenges. One, it is synonymous with audio drama. And while audio drama is a very prestigious portion of podcasting, and I'm talking about things like Serial, like the Magnus Archives, big serialized production shows, that's not all there is. And if you look at the statistics, it's barely one portion of 1% of what there is, but the perception is there, and perception leads audience. The other thing we struggle with is we do not produce audio dramas, although we produce podcasts. We produce audio fiction. So we have 2 feet in 2 different industries. We distribute through a podcast model, and all our content is in audio. But from the perspective of the material we publish, the stories, we're in a publication model of a magazine. So there are things like submissions, ethical guidelines, minimum pay rates, expected contractual positions, all of that we have to balance. And it is both a challenge and a struggle. One of the things at the end of the first 5-year plan was, because we're past that now, was, okay, we need to be more firmly grounded in the podcast space because we've kind of hit the constraints structurally of what we can do in publishing. And it was the best move we could have possibly made, because here in the UK, at least, there is such a welcoming, open podcasting community that wants to learn more about your particular interest. And they're all kind of tied together by the fact that we do this audio thing. They're a little more content agnostic than we struggle with in other areas.
So with the kind of stuff that you're doing, let's say you're a content creator, you're one of the people whose stories might end up there. What's your process? What do you go through? What kind of hoops do those people jump through or not jump through to get to that point?
It's pretty much exactly the same for us as it is for when you submit to a magazine.
Yep.
So the first thing that will happen is your story will go to the slang term is a slush reader. And these are the folks who deal with first line submissions. We call them associate editors, and we're in the process of rolling out pay for all of them because
which is not industry standard.
Past time for the industry. And if a slush reader likes a piece, they'll pass it up to their next one in line.
Mm-hmm.
And once there are enough stories gathered together, those will go in front of, as I understand it, the senior editor, who will then go to the editors. They'll discuss what stories they want, buy them or not as needed.
Yeah. So we work on a licensing model. Much like when you buy a book in a store, you don't own that story. You're interacting with it through a medium. It's the exact same method. So we license stories to be produced into podcast episodes.
So in that model, is it a good thing that it's appeared somewhere else previously, or a bad thing that it's appeared somewhere else previously?
It depends.
It's a thing.
Yeah. So from one perspective, original fiction, i.e. fiction that has never been broadcast or made available to the public before, is very prestigious for a couple of reasons. One, it's new, and two, the recognition that is given to new fiction for things like awards is limited by calendar years.
Yeah.
So it's kind of the first place you publish a story can be seen as having an impact on its critical reception. On the other hand, EA was founded with the idea that there are more magazines out there than people can possibly afford to subscribe to. And so the value of a publication like ours is that we gather and filter together what we like of those thousands and thousands of publications, and you're getting kind of a curated feed of what one editorial team's perception of the best of the field is. It is a curated experience. It's also literally creating a market. I mean, once you sell a story the first time, authors sometimes struggle with knowing that, no, then you sell it again, and then you sell it again, and then you sell it again. It is a product that works for you, to be very blunt and commercial and capitalistic about it. We have licensed and published stories that have been published in audio before. We tend not to be, unless there's a specific experience that we can bring to that story that is new or unique or different. So for example, there is a story called Sunday by Matt Wallace, which is about a teddy bear defender of a small child.
Amazing piece.
Which I think escaped. Who read it first?
I think it was, I want to say it was Pseudopod and then Cast of Wonders.
Okay, so it has been podcast twice on two sister publications. And the reason the second show agreed to do it is because they wanted to take a very different approach to the emphasis of the story, the narration, and the commentary on it. So they had that discussion with the author, and the author agreed to have it done twice. So that's kind of our thinking when it comes to curation of stories. Of course, when you present an audio first, and that's how we describe it, we publish an audio first. And so all of our emphasis is in the art of audio fiction, which is the pairing of a text and a voice. And that is something that some people take to an art form and other people consider maybe perhaps a little bit more mechanical or from an accessibility viewpoint. We're unique in that every single one of our stories gets a hand-picked narrator. It's not just that we have one person who narrates all of our stories, and so you get everything in audio, but you get what that one person would interpret it through. Especially these days with own voices and lived experience, we spend a lot of time and sometimes money making sure that the right voice for the story is the one that's presenting it to the public, whether that's things like making sure the narrator is from the lived experience of the protagonist, things like it's not acceptable just to have an Asian voice. It needs to be the correct nationality and experience and language of voice. That means that we won't, sometimes publish a story longer than we've contracted it for because we don't have the right voice.
If I remember correctly, wasn't it Podcast or Cast of Wonders that sat on a piece for 2 years until they found the right narrator?
We had one story at Cast of Wonders that we waited 18 months on because it was an ensemble Black American cast. And we wanted to make sure we got it right about the correct representation and experience of each of the different Black American characters in the story. And it took a while because it's a smaller pool than we had available already in-house. So we had to do some very targeted recruiting to make it work. But that story sings because that level of effort was put in. And that's what we try to do, is we try to put in that level of effort. It's hard. It is hard and time consuming, but it's the way this author wants the story to be told.
So as an audience, we've talked about the creative side. Let's talk about the audience side. So the audience experience that you guys are offering is curated. That's the word you use, and it's a word I'm very fond of. And also from what you're saying, there's an intense amount of work done toward making sure that the good experience occurs, that the valid experience occurs.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to do your elevator pitch to a person who might be watching your show, what's the elevator pitch or the elevator pitches for the different shows?
Honestly, Ross,
Do the pseudopod
Yeah.
one because he likes this one.
it's the audio version of Night Gallery, the old Rod Serling show. You will get something different every single episode. Every single episode will make you think.
And it's that kind of framing conceit
Yeah.
of there is someone communicating with you around the story as well as the presentation of the story. Yeah, if there was a property that they wanted to give us to make with our content on
what
Netflix,
we could do with Night Gallery.
we want
My
Night
God.
Gallery. And when we do that now with our live shows, when we do a live reading of an EA podcast, and we've done a couple of them now at conventions, that's the framing narrative we take, is we'll weave a story together around a couple of short pieces that will have picked narrators, and sometimes we have the ability to do imagery with it, like backdrops and stuff. And that the Night Gallery model is very much what we keep in mind for our live show, because of course, if you go to a podcasting convention and you're an audio drama fan and you're going to a live show, you're there to see the voice actors perform their characters. This is different. We don't have the authors there to perform their stories, and we do have the voice actors there, but we're trying to duplicate that curated kind of immersive experience through live stage.
That's exactly the way to describe it. It's designed as an immersive experience rather than you've heard the show before, now see the show as you hear it.
Well, it's one of the other things that's unique to audio presentation. You can skim read a book, right? We've all had the feast sequences or the songs that we will skip a couple pages through. The statistics show people do not do that in audio. If you lose engagement with an audio audience, they're gone and they don't come back. They may come back to a different episode, but they're not going to come back to that piece. And that does have an impact on editorial decisions, because if a story lags or sags at any point or doesn't have a compelling narrative way of driving continual motion, it's not the best fit for an audio publication, because we know we're going to hit that lag point and people are going to step away from it.
Yeah. I found it very interesting. I did a Teach the Teacher for IBM one time where I was explaining to people that if you get your beginning right and your end right, people will forgive the middle, because in a live performance, people are not going to walk out. If they, if you've engaged them at the beginning, they'll usually stay all the way through. But you're right. In this case, there's nobody to embarrass you if you get up and walk out in the middle of a podcast. There's nobody to turn around and go, oh, she couldn't sit through another 5 minutes, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very different kind of engagement. So if you were going to describe the perfect target story, the kind of thing that based on the things you've already put out, the things you'd like to put out next, what are the elements that make it really good for the kind of medium you're working with?
You can go first.
I'll go first. This is kind of ironic for me because I tend to be very focused on kind of contemporary stuff, but there is a story that we ran a couple of years ago, which has the most perfect opening I've ever heard. It was the 500th episode of Escape Pod, and we were able to get Sturgeon, and we actually got Anson Mount, Captain Pike from Star Trek Discovery, to narrate it.
I'm gonna look up the title for
and
us.
The first line is, so there's this kid.
And it's just Anson's delivery on that line. It's so conversational and riveting.
Just wraps you up.
You can't put it down.
And that story and the way that it takes that very personal narrative and maps onto something which is anything but personal, and maps onto a C plot about engineering and a D plot about tragedy, is extraordinary.
The Man Who Lost the Sea.
The Man Who Lost the Sea, pardon me.
Yep.
I think that I don't know if that is the best thing we've ever released. I do know it's in the top 5.
For me, the perfect audio.
Say Culture Comp.
Well, okay. I have a personal favorite, and then but with an editorial hat on, you want a story that's going to both engage your audience and inspire your editorial and production staff. So you want something where the editor says, this narrative must be mine,
Mhm.
and where the audience says, I find myself in this, I'm engaged with this. And then the production staff says, I'm going to go above and beyond with how I put this together.
You want something where everybody's going to crack their knuckles when they see
Yeah.
it for the first time.
And each of the shows have kind of developed that sweet spot, I think, for themselves. With Escape Pod, there have been some kind of banner episodes, like the man who stole the sea is one of them. My personal favorite is a story called Culture Conf, and it is an epistological story, so it's told in letters by a member of an army invading Europe with opera. So it's literally marching orchestras, and they talk about there being the timpani. It's Wagner invading with Napoleon, and they talk about, you know, using the timpani and the brass and the key sections. And he has this adorable anecdote with a conductor on a train, and we went above and beyond on the production on this and got public domain available classical music recordings. So as the characters are describing the arias they are weaponizing, this music is playing. And it ends about the guy talking about how, I think we'll go to Russia. They have no composers of note, as Night on Bald Mountain starts up. And, you know, and just that, so I listen to that episode once a year at least, because I'm a classical musical geek. So this hits every single one of my sweet spots. So hearing that blend of what you can do uniquely in audio that you maybe necessarily can't do in a visual medium or just on the text page, and wrapping that all together so that the audience is taken and the editors are taken and the producers are taken, that's what really makes it for me. I mean, on the flip side, of course, there is content that just does not translate well into audio, no matter how engaging a story might be. If it is, for example, poetry that relies on the physical location of the text on the page, that's very, it's not impossible, but it's very difficult to take into audio. If you're making jokes in formulas, or if you're relying on color, House of Leaves probably might not work so well in audio.
I would love to hear an audiobook version of House of Leaves.
I'm sure there are several of them, but you know, things like that either require, I mean, and of course scalability is one of them. If we could do it, if we had access to, you know, 3 Shakespearean actors and 20,000 pounds, then that is a barrier to us being able to engage with that type of storytelling.
Just as a quick aside, there is actually a very good demonstration of how to adapt an unadaptable novel. The BBC do these very sporadic series of 3 or 4 sci-fi classics, which are kind of 2-disc long or full audio adaptations of classic SF novels. A friend of mine, a man who I'd like to describe as having known him so long, we both had hair when we first met, this guy called Guy Adams, was hired to adapt The Shape of Things to Come by H.G. Wells. That novel cannot be adapted because it's not really a novel. It's a collection of 3 or 4 mildly fictionalized treatises. And it took Guy about 2 years, and he's done it. And all the bones of the novel are in there. It's just the skeleton is an entirely different shape.
Yeah.
And it's so cool to listen to. But it speaks absolutely to Marguerite's point of, there is a point beyond which the amount of work you have to put in just isn't practical.
And at that point, you've gone from publishing an author's story to creating a derivative work, a transformative work based on the original story. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I honestly wish there was maybe a little bit more of that in podcasting.
That'd be so cool.
But it's that kind of liminal space between fiction and drama at that point that we all consume as much of as possible what is on Netflix, because they have unlimited budget.
Insanely time expensive, the kind of thing you're talking about. Yes.
Exactly that.
That kind of adaptation to medium, there's a reason why it gets as difficult as it gets for movies and TV in places that have substantial budgets and are allowed a year to do something. Yeah, and you guys are doing 52 a year?
Yeah.
Times 4.
Times 4.
Yes.
Yeah. So that it starts the churn, as we call it, the resources that are devoted to meeting that expectation means that we have limited range for experimentation, and therefore not always as much opportunity. I think if we were going to start, and we've talked about this and we're in the preliminary stages of it, kind of the next step for us would be to take our audience into drama that we produce. We had a digital magazine for about 2 years, which was a very worthy experiment and published
Absolutely
lots of great
beloved.
stories. But what it taught us was that our audience wants audio. We are purely an audio first publication. And so that jump did not succeed in a long-term fashion. And so the next jump of, if we want to get creative and do more, it would be in drama. It would be more audio first content, just things we created and owned ourselves, as opposed to the publication of existing material.
So the way you've been describing it, I'm kind of curious, how many people are involved in getting one of these episodes out the door? How big a team is this?
We are about 90 people around the world right now, EA. So
it's about a team of 22 to 23.
Yeah,
isn't it?
each of the individual shows has between 20 and 25 folks, and then we have a core administrative team, accounting staff. We use a really good contracts administrator, because we do 400 of them a year between editors, between authors and narrators.
Yeah.
And then ourselves and a couple other tech folks and our Twitch moderators and stuff. So yeah, it's almost 100 people, and we are around the world. We have this fantastic example. The first year Escape Pod was nominated for a Hugo Award.
This is so cool.
One of the things you do is you put together a consideration packet. So you usually, this is a PDF that has a whole bunch of your text in it, but we are an audio publication, so we did it in audio and in text. And this document was literally being worked around the globe. We were giving input on it. We were passing it to an East Coast editor, and then they passed it to their West Coast editor, who passed it to the ebook publisher, who was in New Zealand, who then published it back to us when we got up. The document went around the globe as all of us worked it in 72 hours. It was fantastic.
Right.
But yeah, we're all over the place. The company's based in the US, and most of the crew are there. But we're in the UK. We've got folks in New Zealand, Australia, Japan, Singapore, a couple of South Africa, a couple of European countries. I think I'm getting it right. We have fewer people on the Southern Hemisphere outside of Australia and New Zealand, but we don't quite have the planet surrounded, but we're getting there.
And brilliantly, and this will genuinely be my favorite factoid about the company until I die, we have a single listener in Vatican City.
Yeah. And of course, our imaginations are like,
yeah,
please tell me. It's probably some poor bored Swiss guard, but we're all like, the Pope listens to Podcastle. That's what we all think.
You're making me think of my friend Mike Ruane, who's in the software industry, and he brags that he's on 6 out of 7 continents because his software is actually used at McMurdo base.
Oh, nice.
So
nice.
yeah, those little moments like that, yes, are great little factoids. And it's neat. And you guys clearly have a passion for this. So a billion years ago, I interviewed some people when I was talking about how they decided to kind of bet the farm and make this their full-time job. And they looked at me and laughed and said, no, we did this on the side until it became a full-time job. What was your transition? How did you get to this being the thing you do?
We don't. So
okay.
Yeah, this is technically a side hustle for both of us. I'm a technology lawyer, so I work full time, and Alistair's a full-time journalist and writer as well. And EA is our evenings, weekends, vacations, sleep schedules.
It's the side hustle we live inside.
It's this, yeah. So the joke being that we each have about 2.5 full-time jobs.
Yeah.
It's always good when your side hustle is a 90-person company.
When you put it that way.
Yeah. I mean, we would love to do it full time, but we face the same barriers that everybody does. For a digital publication, it is a miracle that we continue to exist as
Yeah.
a donation funded publication and have for 15 years. And we are very thankful of that fact, and we recognize that fact. And I do a lot of mentorship in our community with starting publications who don't have that foundation to build from. We would love it to be full-time, but I'm a lawyer. That's kind of a heck of an income to replace in
Yes.
order to be able to do it. The fact that this year, after 2020, we were able to move up to paying our associate editors
Such a big deal.
is
Yep.
huge for
Yeah.
us and will always be the priority. I would much rather pay our authors more, our contributors more, and our staff more than to do this full time. If it's a choice between my team getting a leg up and me losing sleep because I work 2 jobs, then I'm losing sleep.
So what got you into technology law?
Well, I'm from Silicon Valley originally, so I grew up in the boom. And then when I qualified here in the UK 5-6 years ago, my first role was with Microsoft. So I was in-house with them for 2 years. Then I went back to private practice, and I'm actually starting a new role tomorrow back in technology, which I'm really excited for, back in-house as opposed to private practice.
Oh, very good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Alistair, what got you into journalism?
Basically, how can I put this? I got hit by a triple whammy of TV shows at a very formative time in my life. Northern Exposure, Due South, and Midnight Caller, all of whom have at their core large, polite, well-spoken guys who basically want to help out. And this just perfectly meshed with an awful lot of the adolescent framing network, which I was having to deal with at the time, because I had some less than wonderful things happen. So I came out the other side of it like, okay, I have some things I need to articulate and understand. Let's do it this way. And I came up through student journalism at university. I was one of the first of the new wave of comics journalists in the early 21st century, and have freelanced for various people
And you
ever
don't
since.
like academia,
And
but you like talking about meta text.
And yeah, I'm in this really unusual position where I actually have a master's degree in contemporary English literature. So I'm kind of one degree off potentially being able to go and teach it. And as a teacher's kid, I know that's not something I ever want to do. So I'm far more interested in looking at texts and teaching and helping people understand why a text is broken down like it is and how it's laid out like it is and what influences it. Than going, here is the same four books which we've read every year for the last 10 years. Have fun. But yeah, I love it. I love being able to do what I do, because I'm mildly quixotic, and an awful lot of pop culture journalism, I feel, tends to come from the kind of basis of, okay, impress me, or, well, this is obviously going to be awful and here's why. I am a cinnamon roll.
You are professionally enthusiastic.
I am professionally enthusiastic. I described myself earlier today on another job as I am the patron saint of movies only the Cruise families have seen and TV shows which only aired for 2 episodes. And I am. I feel very passionately, if there is something in a piece of art that makes you feel, that piece of art is valid. And it doesn't matter if it's an 8 season long HBO multi-million-dollar TV show, or if it's a movie filmed in someone's backyard with a Super 8 camera. If it works for you, it works for you. Yeah. And I love being able to find things people would otherwise never have looked at and introduce them to them.
Things can come at you at odd angles. The last interview I did, I had a guy who wrote for Laugh-In, a guy who wrote for The Tonight Show, and a guy who wrote for Mad Magazine on.
Oh, and nice.
Wow.
The guy from Laugh-In said that one of the people they hired was because he wrote the box for Screaming Yellow Zonkers, which was a candy at the time. And the guy running the show liked it so much, he turned to him and said, Roby, find me the guy who wrote this. I want him writing for us.
Nice.
That's brilliant.
I love it.
Yes. So art can strike you from all sorts of weird angles, and you can come across it from the most unexpected places. And sometimes that's the best art.
Yeah.
I just went to a showing at PS1 in New York, which is all art done by convicts.
Nice.
Wow.
And a lot of it was I did this on pink paper because it's the back of requisition forms that they weren't using, so I was allowed to have paper.
Mm.
And when you look at you realize the medium is literally being dictated by their incarceration, not just the impressions, not just the art, but literally their availability of anything.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
extraordinary.
Nice, very nice.
Oh, there was one piece there where the person had literally taken magazines and had built something out of the soap and the hair gel they used that allowed them to do image transfer, and transferred it onto old sheets and built this gigantic wall mural that was there. That is all
Wow.
image transfer out of magazines because that's the art they could do.
That's incredible.
Fascinating. Good stuff.
Yes, art can come from absolutely everywhere.
Mhm.
So we're about to hit time. Is there stuff that you guys want to plug, your upcoming shows that are coming up, where people can find you, all that good stuff?
You want to make a start?
Yeah, of course. We also Twitch stream twice a week on Sundays and on Wednesdays. On Sundays, it is between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. UK GMT, and that's very relaxed kind of video gaming and chat. On Wednesday nights, it's 10 p.m. GMT, and we call it bedtime stories. It started out as out of copyright Victorian horror, and we ended up doing an entire issue of the Kay Vernon novel, which was wonderful, and we're now starting to head in on our next big project.
Yeah.
The 4 shows release every week, I believe Wednesday through Friday is the release cycle across the 3, the other 4.
It says on the shows.
And my pop culture newsletter, The Full Lid, releases 5 p.m. GMT every Friday.
And we will put all of those links in the description.
Fantastic. Yeah, exactly. I'm Legal Valkyrie on Twitter, which is where for my spins I spend the majority of my time. I am not a blogger or currently actively editing. I just do little bits and pieces. A lot of what I focus on right now is kind of community stuff. Like we talked about mentorship, and I also use my legal skills and my business skills to try and help new creative teams bring projects to fruition.
It's very
Which is
exciting
a really
stuff.
roundabout way of saying you're an actual legal superhero.
He said it, I didn't.
How long have you guys been together?
Oh, math. No, our 10-year anniversary was 2020 because we remembered
actually
in
did
time and
something
we
for
actually
it as well. It was great.
It was 10 years is Diamond. So we watched Diamond heist movies. We watched Ocean's 8, Romancing the Stone, and the Muppet Caper.
Very, very, very cool. And on that note, Danny.
Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to check out Artist Alley located behind the dealer's hall.
Bye, guys.